A millionaire pays $5 for masked virgin at secret auction, marries her when she says her name. Beneath Manhattan, where light couldn't reach and the city's roar was muffled by stone walls, an auction was underway. It had no name, no registry, no surveillance. It existed like a fracture, a line between wealth and depravity, where powerful men bought people the way they bought rare wines or old art. The auction room glowed with crystal chandeliers, their light reflecting off cold marble. 12 men sat in a crescent of velvet chairs. Old money, new money, oil money, dirty money. Each man had come for a reason he would never say aloud. They didn't need to ask who the final offering was. They had waited for her. She stood beneath a spotlight as harsh as a scalpel. Her black hair fell like a curtain down her back. A white silk dress brushed her ankles, clinging to her frame. Her bare feet rested on a round wooden platform. Her shoulders were trembling beneath thin fabric. A mask of ivory silk covered her face from brow to cheekbone, tied tightly behind her neck. She didn't look up. She didn't move. She was the last lot. The auctioneer, flawless in his suit and razor-thin smile, tapped a sleek gavel against a tablet. "Gentlemen, our final item this evening, untouched, no papers, no identity. By her own request, she is masked. Her name, if there is one, will be shared only if she chooses." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Wine glasses gleamed. Hands lifted lazily, measured gestures of dominance. 50,000, one man offered. 100. 200. The numbers climbed, not out of need, but because owning what no one else had touched made them feel invincible. Raiden Halt sat near the back, dressed in plain black. No one noticed him. He didn't smile. A flash of diamond on his watch caught the light. His eyes never left the girl, not her mask, but her breath. The way it fought against the silk around her throat. She looked ready to fall, and still she stood. 1 million, someone called. 3 million. Then 4 million. And finally, 5 million. The voice cut through the room like a blade. Heads turned. Raiden didn't blink. 5 million, he repeated. Silence swallowed the room. The auctioneer hesitated. 5 million, sir? Yes. Raiden's gaze never wavered. Sold. The gavel struck once. The girl didn't lift her head, but one hand trembled. She didn't know it yet. He hadn't bought her to own her. He had bought her to set her free. 5 million euros, a price one man was willing to pay, not to own a body, but to buy back the freedom of a girl the world had locked behind silk and silence. The room didn't breathe. Even monsters knew what that number meant. It wasn't possession. It was war. Raiden Halt didn't take the girl to a cheap hotel room, nor to a rented flat, nor any place that had ever known the footsteps of men who treated human beings like items on a menu. He led her out through a private rear exit, a path without cameras, without light, without noise. Black-suited men with discreet earpieces flanked their way like shadows turned to stone. She said nothing, barely moved. The mask stayed in place, pulled tight across her cheekbones. Each step she took carried the weight of a world that had never been kind. A black SUV idled at the curb. Raiden opened the door without touching her. She slipped in, folding her hands tight in her lap, eyes cast downward. He sat beside her, leaving a careful distance between them. Neither spoke as the city passed by in streaks of neon and silence. Outside, lights slid across the windows like memories neither of them wanted to revisit. Raiden didn't look at her, but he studied her reflection in the glass. The silk clung so close to her skin it looked like it might suffocate. He wondered if it ever let her breathe. His penthouse stood 52 stories above the noise, a tower of glass and steel. He had bought the entire top floor years ago when his name first cracked the lists of the country's wealthiest. The elevator opened. She stepped out first, barefoot on marble that shimmered like ice. No one told her to walk, but she did, as if stopping might invite fear to catch up. Raiden followed silently. Michael waited near the kitchen, silver-haired, straight-backed. He didn't stare. He didn't question. Raiden nodded once. "Show her the guest suite. No one disturbs her. No one opens the door unless she asks." Michael bowed slightly, a gesture rare and sincere. The girl didn't speak, but followed him without hesitation. As her footsteps faded down the hall, Raiden remained still in the open space, hands in his pockets, eyes tracing where she had just walked. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he entered his office, glass walls, cold surfaces, screens aglow with restless blue. On one monitor, a frozen image waited. A girl much younger, her hair tangled, her eyes hollow, rope wrapped around her wrists, part of her face hidden. The file read, "Leela Win, age 22, reported missing 2 years ago." Raiden reached out, his fingertips brushing the screen like they could pull her back. Somewhere down the hall, the masked girl lay on a bed softer than any cage she'd ever known. And he wondered, was she still that girl beneath the silk? Would she ever trust someone enough to remove the mask and speak the name the world tried so hard to erase? Raiden's penthouse mirrored the man himself, quiet, cold, and built to keep others out. No family photos on the walls, no clutter, no softness. Just black stone, glass walls, and the constant hum of security systems that never slept. The masked girl, Leela, was given the guest suite, where warm gold light filtered through silk curtains. The door was never locked, but no one entered. Michael brought clean clothes, towels, bottled water. She touched none of it. Raiden didn't approach her after that first night, but every morning he brought a small tray himself, a cup of hot tea or coffee, a single slice of toast still warm. He never knocked, just set it down outside the door and walked away. She never spoke, never looked out. Still, he did it again the next morning. The first 4 days passed like this. She didn't eat, didn't speak, barely moved beneath the white sheets that seemed to swallow her whole. On the 5th day, he found the tray neatly returned beside the door. Untouched, but folded, straightened. The first sign. By the 7th day, Michael reported the door had been left slightly ajar, just enough that he didn't have to knock twice. Raiden said nothing, but each night he sat in his office, watching the quiet hallway on the security feed, just to make sure no one ever neared that door. On the 8th night, rain fell. A sudden storm cracked open Manhattan's sky. Thunder rolled like something breaking. Raiden stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the lightning score through blackness like silver blades. He almost didn't hear her footsteps. When he turned, she was already there, barefoot, quiet, the hem of her robe brushing the cold marble. Her mask remained, but her eyes were wide, catching flashes of stormlight like wells too deep to measure. She didn't speak at first, just stared through the glass, hands clenched in front of her chest. Raiden didn't move closer. He lifted a hand toward the couch. "Sit if you want." She moved slowly, almost slipped, but made it to the edge of the sofa, sitting like she might vanish if someone blinked too hard. He walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and set it on the coffee table before her. He didn't look at her when he did. She didn't touch it, but her eyes followed every movement, as if watching to see whether the hand would soothe or strike. She flinched when thunder cracked again. A small sound escaped her lips, sharp, involuntary. Raiden gripped his knee to resist the urge to reach out. Instead, he said the only truth that needed no permission. "I hate storms too." She turned her head. Slowly. She didn't look away. Her fingers moved toward the knot behind her neck, then dropped again. She whispered, barely audible, "I thought they'd come for me tonight." Raiden leaned forward just enough that she could see his face in the low light. "No one comes through that door unless you want them to. No one touches you unless you ask." She didn't answer, but she didn't leave. The second sign. Little by little, she began leaving quiet signs that she was still here, not for anyone else, but for herself. But no one can reclaim a name without first facing the past. And one day, she stepped into the one room she should have avoided, just to look straight at the image of who she once was, the day the world chose to forget her. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The door to Raiden's study was ajar, cold blue light spilling from the monitors like a crack across the dark. She stood inside, silent. She didn't touch anything, and she wasn't afraid. Raiden appeared in the doorway, quiet. He didn't step in right away, didn't ask why she was there. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the screen. It was a photo, blurry, grainy, but far too clear to deny. A young girl, tangled hair, empty eyes, wrists bound by rough rope, part of her face hidden under slick strands. Below the image, bold type read, Leela Win, age 22, reported missing 2 years ago. Raiden stepped in slowly, keeping distance. She spoke first, voice thin and tight as wire. "How long have you been looking for me?" He stopped, no apology in his voice, only truth. "Since the first time I saw your face on a security feed. I didn't know it was you then, but I knew. If I didn't search, no one else would." She didn't turn, but her voice dropped. "And if you found me, then what?" Raiden answered without hesitation. "I wouldn't let you disappear again." Silence. She didn't say she believed him, but when she turned, her eyes met his, and they didn't flinch. "Raiden," she said, using his name for the first time. "Can you tell the truth?" He nodded. "You bought me," she said, not angry, just empty. Just like they did. He didn't move, didn't flinch, but his voice was steady. "I did, but not to own you. I paid so no one else ever could again." She looked at him, long, unblinking, then turned back to the screen. "If I give you my name," she said, each word pulled from somewhere deep, "you have to make them say it, every single one of them, so they can't pretend I never existed." Raiden's reply came soft and sure. "You have my word." She gave a small nod. Her hand lifted, reaching for the knot at the base of her neck. She didn't take off the mask, but she loosened it, just enough for the light to catch the faint scar that ran down her left cheek. A thin cut, once a mark of pain. Now, proof that she'd survived. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She just whispered, like a vow. "My name is Leela Win." Her name had been spoken, like the final cut through the silence that had wrapped around her for 2 years. But to truly live beneath that name, Leela needed more than words. She needed to shed the last silk skin the past had forced upon her. And when she did, no one in the penthouse doubted it anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was coming back. She removed the mask on a night no one expected. Not in panic, not in tears. Just silence. Raiden was sitting on the couch, reviewing files for the 5th time. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Leela walked into the living room, glass of water in hand, her hair loose, robe tied soft at the waist. The mask was gone from her face. It lay folded in her palm, just a piece of silk now. Nothing sacred. The light hit the scar down her left cheek. It wasn't jagged, it wasn't monstrous, it was real. Raiden didn't speak. Leela didn't explain. She placed the mask on the table and sat across from him. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. Her silence said it all. "I don't need to hide anymore." The next morning, Raiden called Michael. His private team, hackers, engineers, digital ghosts, began to work. Every hidden account, every shell company, every scrubbed log was brought back from digital oblivion. The trafficking network that once swallowed Leela whole was pulled apart piece by piece, not just names, but dates, locations, transactions. The men from the auction were identified through code fragments and decrypted files. Each name, a bullet into the dark. Leela watched it all, still, cold, unwavering. When Raiden turned the screen toward her, her eyes didn't flinch. "Keep going," she said. "We haven't reached the root." Raiden nodded. Then the message arrived, just one line, delivered through a secure channel only a few knew existed. "You stole my property. I'm coming to take it back." No name. Raiden didn't need one. Cutter. He'd once been her owner, the first to place a bid, the first to bind her wrists, the first to erase her name. Now he returned, not with legal threats, not with lawyers, but with the twisted certainty that she still belonged to him. Raiden closed the screen, turned to her. "We have to leave." She met his eyes, calm, not shaken. "Where?" "Cabin by the sea, Maine. Quiet, safer than the city." "All right," she said, rising, "but I'm not running." He paused, then faced her fully. Leela looked straight into him. "You need to know something," she said, placing her hand over the mask still lying on the table. "If he comes?" Raiden nodded. "He won't reach you." She shook her head. "If he comes, I'll wait." The cabin sat at the edge of pine forest and gray shoreline, far from city lights. One floor, old oak walls, wide windows that opened to the sound of waves. No Wi-Fi, no signal, just wind and water and sky. They arrived at dawn. Leela didn't speak much during the drive, but when they entered, she quietly hung the white dress she'd been sewing, night after night, on a wooden hook near the bed. She didn't ask when they would leave. She didn't ask if Cutter would find them. Only one thing she whispered, resting her head briefly against Raiden's chest under the kitchen's dim glow. "If he comes, I won't hide behind you. I'll face him." Raiden nodded. His answer didn't need words. Outside, the tide swept the shore, erasing the last footprints of the girl Leela used to be. Leela used to think freedom was a door that simply opened, but it wasn't. It was a journey, a slow one, fractured, sometimes painfully quiet. But for the first time in years, she wasn't walking it alone. Raiden never asked if she was ready. He didn't push, but every time she moved toward the truth, even a single step, he was there. Not ahead, not pulling her along, just beside her, silent, unshakable. And that was enough. Leela no longer hid in the guest suite. She no longer sat curled on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped tight around her knees, like letting go might collapse her world. Now, every night, as the penthouse bathed in the glow of monitors and the city outside faded into distant hums, she sat beside Raiden, in his office, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the screens. She didn't understand all the algorithms or encrypted data Raiden and his team worked through. But she learned. She asked questions. She remembered names. She traced numbers with her fingertips, like reading a map of a world that once swallowed her whole. How long did they hide this? How many names haven't surfaced yet? Was there anyone else who got out? Raiden answered every question, clearly, honestly, not because she was a victim, but because now she was his partner. Each night he let her stay, not to protect her from the darkness, but to teach her how to face it. Leela wasn't someone to be rescued anymore. She stood with him now, learning to tear off the mask from a system that had thrived in the shadows too long. One night she reached out, her finger resting on a name that had just surfaced from the encrypted data. "This one," she said. "I remember him. He came once." Raiden looked at her. "Then we'll drag him into the light." She nodded. One name at a time. Night 3. The wind howled past the cabin windows, carrying salt and the steady hum of the tide. Inside, only the ticking of a wooden wall clock and the crackling of a low-burning fire filled the silence. Leela sat by the window, moonlight stretching pale across her skin. Her eyes were wide open, but she wasn't looking at anything outside. In her hands, the white silk mask rested quietly, neatly folded, the only thing that had ever hidden both the scar on her cheek and the fear in her chest. Raiden watched her from the kitchen table, his hand curled tightly around the loaded pistol. He didn't speak. He knew she wasn't the girl who needed saving anymore. Then came the sound. Tires crunching gravel just outside. They both heard it. Leela didn't move. She placed the mask on the windowsill. The moment she'd been waiting for had arrived, and strangely, her heart didn't race. The door flung open. He didn't knock. Cutter stepped into the cabin like it belonged to him, sharp eyes, smile thin and serrated. No greeting, no announcement. Just the presence of cruelty so familiar it turned the air to stone. His eyes passed over Raiden, then landed squarely on Leela. "You've held up well," he said, voice cool, almost admiring. "Good enough to sell again." Leela's chest tightened, but she didn't look away. Not this time. Raiden moved forward, voice low and solid. "She doesn't belong to you." Cutter gave a crooked smile. "You're wrong. She's property. Doesn't matter who buys. I had her first." Each word he spoke scraped through Leela's memory. Dark rooms, twisted bindings, the whir of cameras. Her stomach knotted. But there was no fear, only anger and resolve. Leela bent down and picked up the silk mask. Her fingers gripped the ribbon, feeling the softness that had once been her only shield. Then she let it fall to the floor. A faint sound, almost nothing. No one spoke. She stepped on it with her bare foot, pressing down, grinding the delicate fabric beneath her heel. "You can't sell what no longer exists." Her voice rang out, sharp, clear, like a bell cutting through the dark. Cutter growled, his temper slipping. He lunged, feral, fast. Raiden was there in an instant, blocking the charge. They crashed against the doorframe, fists colliding. A knife flashed in Cutter's hand, but Raiden twisted his wrist, sending it clattering to the floor. Leela didn't scream. She didn't run. She picked up the mask again, now torn, twisted like the version of herself that had once worn it, and walked toward the fireplace. "This was what you made me wear," she whispered. Then she threw it into the flames. The fire roared to life, orange tongues licking the silk until it curled, blackened, and turned to ash. Behind her, Cutter roared, broken fury echoing in the cabin. Leela turned. With the fire blazing behind her, she stood tall. The long scar on her cheek caught the light. Not something to hide, but a badge of survival. Her voice was calm, steady, but thunderous. "You forgot my name once. You don't get to forget it again. Say it, loud, so the ghosts can hear." He froze. One breath, a beat of shock. Raiden didn't wait. He wrapped his arm around Cutter's neck, yanked him back, slammed him into the doorframe. The fight ended fast, violent and final. Michael entered then, two plainclothes agents behind him. They moved without a word, binding Cutter's wrists with the same kind of rope he had once used on girls like Leela. She stepped closer. She looked down at him, not with rage, not with triumph, but with freedom. No words. Only when he turned his face away first, she turned too. Raiden came beside her. He didn't reach out. He just stood there, where he had always been. She exhaled softly. I'm ready now," she said. "Not for revenge. To live." Raiden nodded. He didn't need to say a thing. Leela turned to the fire. The flames were dying down now. The mask was gone. No shape, no trace. Only her, and a face she could finally call her own. The fire in the hearth faded into embers, leaving behind ash and a quiet gentleness between two people who had walked through hell. But for Leela, this wasn't the end, because freedom wasn't just about letting go of the past. It was about choosing what came next. The next morning, the cabin smelled of warm ash and ocean wind. Leela stood alone by the fireplace, stirring the embers with a half-burned stick. On her fingers, the soot clung like the last trace of the mask that once hid all her fears. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She was just still, as if for the first time in her life, the world had nothing left to take. Raiden sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a cold coffee cup. He said nothing. He didn't need to. They had made it through the hardest part. But then, Leela asked, eyes on the ashes, not him. You knew Cutter before all this, didn't you? Raiden set the cup down and rose slowly. He didn't dodge the answer. I helped build the encryption system they used to hide the auctions. I thought I was building a firewall to protect good people. But Cutter, he was one of the first who bought his way in. She didn't speak, but her shoulders tensed. You stayed silent, she said, not accusing, just stating what she had already sensed. Until I saw your face on that old footage. After that, silence wasn't an option. Leela turned then, meeting his eyes. For the first time, her gaze didn't tremble. It didn't beg. You helped build the cage, then you paid to open the door? You think that makes us even? Her voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't forgiving either. Raiden stepped closer, now just a breath away. I don't want even. I want truth. Leela let the stick fall, let it hit the ashes. She wiped her hands on her thigh, streaks of soot smudging the fabric. Then she looked up, no longer retreating. I don't want you to stand there, Raiden Halt. I want you beside me. She lifted her hand, placed it gently on his jaw. Her scar mirrored in the way he looked back at her. Raiden took her wrist, not to pull her closer, just to hold it, to wait. She leaned in, kissed him, not gently, but like a vow. We don't have to be clean, just real. That kiss wasn't like anything Raiden had ever known. Not soft, not shy, not in need of saving. It came like a declaration, powerful, cutting straight into the deepest part of his chest, the place where only emptiness had lived for years. The moment her lips touched his, the world outside vanished. The wooden cabin, the scent of ash, the sound of the sea wind. Only her remained, real, vivid, unhidden. She kissed like someone who had spent a lifetime learning she was worthy of being loved. And he received it like someone who had waited for this very moment, not because she was fragile, but because she chose him when she was no longer afraid. Raiden's heart pounded, not from surprise, but from certainty. From now on, he was no longer her protector. He was the one she reached for. And in that reach, all their past, mistakes, wounds, regrets, felt like they were finally being forgiven. Not with words, but with truth. They left the cabin the next day. They returned to the city just as the story hit its peak. News of Cutter's arrest flooded the press. The men who once laughed in hidden auction rooms were now splashed across front pages. Leela and Raiden, a billionaire hacker and a girl once silenced, became the faces no one could stop talking about. But amid the media storm, Leela stayed silent. Until one morning, standing before a sea of microphones and flashing cameras, she spoke, not loudly but clearly. I am not property. I am not anonymous. I am Leela Win. That was all. Then she walked away. No explanations, no apologies, no need to be understood. That night, while the city buzzed with breaking headlines, Raiden's penthouse was almost unnaturally quiet. He returned from a late meeting, jacket slung over his shoulder, and stepped into the living room. There she was, Leela, in the white dress she had sewn herself. No makeup, no jewelry, just her, real, present, waiting. Her hair was pinned up with a silver comb. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She simply held out her hand. Raiden froze. His heart skipped once. Do you know how beautiful you look right now? He asked, voice raw. Leela raised her head, letting the light fall on her scar, on eyes that no longer hid. "This isn't perfect, Raiden. This is real." And then, without music, without guests, without any grand announcement, she said, "Marry me now, here, just us." Raiden didn't ask again. He didn't need confirmation. He simply nodded, the same way he had nodded the night she spoke her name. There was no diamond, no gold, just a single silver ring engraved with one word, Leela. She slid it onto her finger, and the light from Manhattan's glass towers caught on the tiny carved letters, a name once hidden, now chosen. Their vow needed no witnesses, no fireworks, just a name etched into silver and eyes that never looked away. But for Leela, love was never the finish line. It was the beginning, a place from which she could step into the light, face the world. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the glass walls of the penthouse, gently coloring the scars that the darkness had once left behind. Leela stood alone in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, her fingers resting against the cold pane. The silver ring on her finger caught the first light of day, glinting, not like jewelry, but like something reclaimed. Raiden approached from behind. He said nothing at first, just wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're staring at the city again." His voice was soft, familiar, like an old habit. Leela nodded slightly. "I just want to make sure it knows. I'm still here." Her breath fogged the glass, warm and brief, but enough to prove she was alive. Alive with a name that no one had the right to take anymore. Silence stretched between them for a beat. "Do you regret it?" she asked, eyes still fixed on the distant skyline. Raiden tightened his hands around hers. "No," he answered, firm and without hesitation. "The mask didn't break you. It only helped you learn how to choose." Leela smiled, softly, without weight. She turned to face him. Her eyes didn't hide, didn't guard. They simply looked at him with the truth of someone who had walked through fire and still chose to stand. She kissed him, not quickly, not fearfully, but like a thank you, like both an ending and a beginning. Then she whispered, "I am Leela Win, and I belong to no one." Raiden leaned forward, his forehead resting gently against hers. "But you choose me." And that was enough, not because she belonged to him, but because she finally belonged to herself. No more was needed, not the world's validation, not forgiveness, not erasure, just truth. That she was no longer a victim, no longer a product, no longer a name buried in a missing file. She was Leela Win, someone who chose how to live, chose who to love, and chose light as the place to call home.